Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, January 26th, 1969, in Oakland, California, at the St. Augustine Episcopal Church. It's the start of a new community program, the Free for Children Breakfast Program, and that program does what you'd think. It provides free meals for kids in the community, most of them black and brown kids in Oakland. And, I suppose I should read the full title of the breakfast program. It is the Black Panther Party Free for Children Breakfast Program, and that makes this story a little more interesting. Let's talk about some of the work of the Black Panthers. Their full name, by the way, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, which was founded to address police brutality, among many other issues in the community. Let's talk about why they were starting a free breakfast program for kids. A program, I should add, that eventually spread all around the country and may have contributed to the rise of free breakfast programs for kids in schools, which is something my daughter takes advantage of from time to time to this day. So here to do that, as always, are Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
And our special guest for this episode is Mary Phillips, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Lehman College in the Bronx. Beautiful campus, by the way. I love going up there. But hello, Mary.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this.
Yes. Happy to be here.
I should mention you're working on a book about Erica Huggins, who was one of the longest serving women members in the Black Panthers. That book is forthcoming. I don't know if I just blew up your spot by mentioning that book, but clearly an area of interest for you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm really excited about the book. The book is a biography of Erica Huggins. She was director of the Black Panther Party's Oakland Community School. She was a political prisoner. She was a poet in the organization. And the book really looks at the history of her relationship with spirituality. You know, she reached deep and really pulled on those spiritual practices to help her come out of prison alive in peace as a whole person. And then she took those practices, particularly some of those practices with yoga and meditation, and she brought them to the young children in the Black Panther Party's Oakland Community School. So I talk a little bit about that and her history around spiritualism and social activism.
So we'll do a episode on her for sure when the book comes out. We'll have you back on. But on the breakfast program, was she there, you think, January 26th, 1969, serving food? I don't know if you know what they served. And then also, one of the first things that strikes me about this story is it's happening in a church. And it's interesting you mentioned spirituality. And I don't know if you have thoughts on the connection between the Black Panther Party and local churches.
Yeah, very good question. So Erica Huggins joined, since you particularly asked about her, she joined in the LA chapter. So she was very much involved in the breakfast program. The breakfast program was one of the foundational community programs of the Black Panther Party. It was one of the first Black Panther Party programs that they had. And they had it because they were trying to counter some of many people have heard of the term war on poverty, right? Something that government initiatives that was to address many of the inequities in society, structurally, and it was not trickling over to Black and brown communities, Black and brown poor communities. And so the Black Panther Party was all about feeding the community, serving the community's needs. What does the community need? And many children were hungry, right? Many children were not, their families were not able to get a full, balanced, nutritious breakfast. But every chapter was mandated to have a breakfast program. Almost every single Black Panther Party member, that was one of their many tasks that they had to do, was be involved in a breakfast program. This entailed getting up very early in the morning, 6:00 in the morning, coming to the church or wherever the breakfast program was housed. Oftentimes it was housed in the church, and preparing breakfast. This is everything from eggs, grits, bacon, home fries, ham, French toast, you name it. They had a full breakfast. They had a full breakfast laid out, prepared, men and women, to serve the children. That was fundamentally important. The breakfast program became so popular. By 1969, there were hundreds of breakfast programs all over the chapters. And, their work pushed the government to admit that the Panthers were feeding more kids than they were. right, in the community, which is really, really important. Asada Shakur, in her autobiography, talks about waking up in the early morning hours, working for the breakfast program. And she has a really funny story around that. Just one of the children not caring too much for some of the eggs that she cooked. But it's a nice, fun story. But then also, young students can take food home with them. If they need it more home, oftentimes they'll say, hey, there's stuff in their pockets. You know what I'm saying? And they're like, hey, you can take that food home with you. This also branched out and got bigger where, if we look at the Panthers, Oakland Community School, they served a lunch and they served a dinner as well. And so this is a fundamental program.
I love the fact that the food that they're serving it's not like, Fruit Loops or cereal. We think of like sugary cereals. It's meat. It's pancakes and grits. It's hearty food that's meant to really keep them through the day. If for some kids, this might be the only meal that they get. I think that it's so important that they're being very conscious and strategic about what it is that they're cooking for these kids.
That's right. That was really, really important. They wasn't loading them up with a bunch of sugar. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just children of the Black Panther Party. It was open to everyone. Everyone was welcome. So that was key. This could also, even though this was not something they were trying to do, I think in some ways it also worked as a recruitment tool as well to get more members to join the Black Panther Party. But it was definitely a community centerpiece. I remember when I was doing my interviews with local Detroiters, because I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I remember talking to some residents about the Black Panther Party. And they said, the Black Panther Party was everything to me. I could go to the Black Panther Party chapter and I could, not only could my children get full breakfast, but we can also go and we could get clothes. We can get all kinds of things that we might have needed that we were, otherwise unable to get. We can get groceries or what have you. So, they truly did serve and care and love their community. Absolutely.
I also want to follow up on the kind of church and religion angle of this, because I think when we have this image of the early Black civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, so much of it is rooted in church institutions. It's led by people who are ministers and reverends. What was the relationship of the Black Panther Party to Black religion in places like Oakland?
Yeah, well, when you think about the Black church, there is a strong political activism, political history with the Black church when we think about the civil rights movement. And the Panthers were very much part of this history, part of this legacy. And oftentimes, the church is the space where you can come to get that support, and to get that kind of foundational space or what have you. And so the church really served as many central headquarters, churches and community centers for the breakfast program in particular. When we look in particular about the early 70s, the Panthers started their own church-like institution. It was called the Son of Man Temple. Their major pastor was Bobby Seale. He became an ordained priest, and this was after his incarceration when he got out as well. And so there was, previous to that, while they had a working relationship with many churches, there was, many, when we think about spirituality or we think about the church, there was a void in the Black Panther Party. You had members that were getting killed by the police. The political repression in relationship to the Black Panther Party was alive and well, with the FBI onslaught happening literally every single day, right? Children of the Black Panther Party seeing things that no child should ever see, seeing the kind of violence, seeing the kind of surveillance, right, that is happening to the Black Panther Party as a whole. And then, there were many who were not able to properly grieve, right? And that can take a toll on you. And so, many members was like, hey, we need this. And so this is one of the reasons why Bobby Seale started that church in the early 70s, the Son of Man Temple. Not a lot of research has been done on the Son of Man Temple, but it was certainly something that came every single Sunday. They had the Lumpin', which was a funk band that was members of the Black Panther Party, and they would perform, right? And so it was something that was part of what you did as a member. You went to the Son of Man Temple on Sundays.
You're used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting The World Together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
Can we talk a little bit about the political dimension to this program, if there was one? I mean, there is some reporting or some reports that there was a little bit of spreading the word or handing out of literature or talking about sort of other issues alongside the breakfast program, which, recruitment, if you want to use that word. And then, the FBI certainly saw this as a political act and as a political threat. And I mean, there are incredible stories of law enforcement basically like spreading rumors that the food was tainted or destroying the food before it could even go out. And Hoover called like this specific program the biggest threat as part of his, declaration of war on the Black Panthers, so to speak. So what was the political mix, either as it existed or as it was sort of framed in terms of what the Black Panther was starting to represent?
Well, you're absolutely right about all of that. And I know the Panthers were very conscious of the media and the media's role to distort what they were doing. And this is part of the reason why they started to own newspaper as part of the counterculture, to really, challenge what the media was spreading, the lies, the misinformation the media was spreading, and to really, showcase what was happening in the organization from the perspective of the Panthers themselves, right? They would advertise, where to come to gather, to get the breakfast, get a full breakfast or what have you. And so this was important. So they're constantly being aware of this. Now, yes, you're absolutely right when we think about the kind of political import of the free breakfast program, particularly, for example, if it was around Huey's birthday, there was definitely conversation with the children around celebrating Huey P. Newton, right? Or if it was, you had a fallen soldier, there was conversation around that. So the children were very aware that they were part of this, part of the Black Panther Party. They were being politically educated. They were raising their political consciousness at a very young age, very socially and politically conscious. And I will argue they were also aware, many of the young children, of the ways in which the repression was affecting the organization as well. So these are politically astute children, right? That the Panthers are really educating and raising their young, the consciousness of their young minds as well. But I think the Panther newspaper becomes a critical, I will argue it's its own institution, if you will, to really distill the activities that are going on in the organization, political thinkers in the organization, those who have been incarcerated, and really dismantling. But this was about communicating to the people, right? Communicating to the people as well.
There's a quote from Hoover where he talks about the breakfast program specifically, and he says that they are actively soliciting and receiving support from, and he characterizes them as uninformed whites and moderate blacks. And that is his main concern. And I'm just curious, kind of like, you can see in there, it's not, they're feeding a bunch of, poor black kids. It's more these, the uninformed whites, as he puts it, moderate blacks. But was the program really kind of reaching outside of those circles in that way?
Reaching outside the circles in that, because when I hear this quote from Hoover, I mean, I know that it's not true. So I'm trying to I'm trying to clearly understand.
But were there say, okay, let's take moderate whites, right? Were there moderate white residents of Oakland, California, maybe Berkeley, California. And were they watching this food program? And, they would have otherwise been turned off by the Black Panthers. But were they watching this food program? And was that actually sort of changing minds in a larger sense beyond just feeding kids in the community?
Well, I will say this. The Panthers had a relationship with progressive white people, right? So they had a relationship with Students for a Democratic Society, for example, where they actually came together across differences and they mobilized, just like the Panthers work with feminist organizations as well. So, I would say to a degree, if they were progressive minded, they joined in, you know what I'm saying? They figured out ways to support some of the efforts of the Black Panther Party. It wasn't a member of the Black Panther Party, but they certainly figured out ways. How can we support the Black Panther Party, having conversations with, the more prominent leaders of the organization? There's many examples of that. Then you got, what also comes to mind is the left 1960s progressive rights in Hollywood. I mean, they came out with huge support for the Black Panther Party, particularly political prisoners, offering money to support those who were incarcerated. Everybody from Jane Fonda, it's many of them.
Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando, thank you, that came out huge support. And actually, Marlon Brando spoke at a lot of events, right? A lot of rallies of the Black Panther Party as well. So there was quite a nice amount of white progressive support for the Panthers because it's about justice.
What I find most fascinating about the breakfast program is how they tried to really subvert gender roles. So they made it so that children could see men cooking in the kitchen and women doing office work. They wanted children to have a different perspective of who cooks and who helps and who leads.
Yeah. Well, one thing about the Panthers, when you first became a member of the Panthers, they had you fill out this form, right? And so they wanted to see how much education you had. What was your skills? What could you bring to the Black Panther Party, particularly because they wanted to place you accordingly, right?
Will you burn the grits? Important questions.
Will you season the food?
Yes.
right. If you had writing skills or what have you, there was publicity work that you could have done or what have you. They wanted to place you accordingly. So this is where you begin to challenge these gender roles because it's not based on your gender, but your skill set, right? And so this is how this oftentimes get flipped. I mean, there's pictures that you can Google of the breakfast program, and you have men in the kitchen serving food, right? Hugging
aprons.
Children, loving children, in aprons, doing hair. You know what I'm saying? Just really, really loving children, right? And so you definitely see that. And it varies. All of this, when we think about the gender dynamics in the party, it varies by chapter, it varies by region, it varies on what particular year we're talking about. Some chapters were more progressive than other chapters when we think about gender, but certainly when we deal with the breakfast program, this is one of those programs where there was some intention to really subvert those roles and really place folks accordingly. You also see this in the Oakland Community School, where you see men as teachers, you see a whole range of things. But yeah, absolutely.
As we start to wrap up, I sort of hinted before that there's some historical work that indicates that at least maybe, if not a direct connection, it's impossible to ignore that at the same time that this breakfast program is sort of spreading across the country, as you said, it's sending a message to the U.S. government. They're like, hey, who's feeding our kids? And around this same time and in the years since is when we start to get the rise of federally funded programs and mandates that schools now, not churches, but schools provide free breakfast for kids. And that continues, very much to this day. And frankly is, one of the sort of vital roles that schools play to this day. But do you see a connection there, or can you paint that landscape?
Oh, it's absolutely a connection there. We wouldn't have the program in the schools, where children are getting fed breakfast, If it was not for the Panthers laid the foundation, they laid the groundwork for it, and they don't get enough credit for their work. Like I said, the government admitted that they're feeding more children than they were actually doing it. And so when their program became one that was more institutionalized, they already had a blueprint looking at the Panthers. As well, and so the Panthers went to the community, they went to local grocers, and they said, hey, we need you to contribute to, this is what we're doing, we need you to contribute, or we're going to tell the people not to support you. So you should get on the right side.
That's interesting. I
love it.
It started out so community minded, and then there's a little thread at the end.
And if you don't,
right. And so, and that's how they was able to do, so much free food and serving the community. But yeah, and the government finally got on board.
We should say that those breakfast programs are still around, and this is one of my little favorite factoids from the early 2000s, is that the Huey P. Newton Foundation created its own hot sauce called Burn Baby Burn. And the proceeds went to this service to the people programs, including these free breakfast programs for children.
love it.
Yeah, well, Bobby Seale is a chef. Bobby Seale cooks.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying? He's a comedian. He cooks. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
I love it because my kids get free lunch, and I think just maybe this past year, as a result of the pandemic, Massachusetts made all lunches for school, any public school, free. And so I love it because it doesn't stigmatize children who are of lesser income. If you're at a wealthy school or at a poor school, any child will not be denied a free lunch or a free meal. And so I think that means a lot.
Well, and I'll just say my wife works in public schools here in New York City. And I mean, one thing I remember is when the pandemic hit, the first priority was how can we still keep getting food out to kids who need it? And it was like, of all the other things, remote learning, before, getting iPads to kids who don't have them or don't have Wi-Fi, it was like within days, it was like driving around and giving meals or, having one person come in and open the door to set up meals because we, it just showed how much, how much people rely on schools for their meals, which I think is, a question worth asking, but also just how vital that service is to a community.
And these, and let me emphasize, these children can get as much food as they wanted. It wasn't like, okay, you come get your serving and you're done, or we have to reserve. I don't know if y'all been in different lines.
Yeah, you got yours, now get back.
Exactly.
You've already had 2 pancakes.
No. Right. No, it wasn't like that at all. It really was a loving and caring space to serve the basic needs of the people. Basic human needs.
Well, this is great. Super fascinating. And we'll post some of these, but people should go just find pictures of this because, as we've been hinting at, it's just a remarkable kind of moment and thing to look at. Mary, when your book on Erica Huggins comes out, you're going to put a couple recipes in the back, maybe?
Well, I don't know if I would do that, but I do talk about food scarcity, particularly in the 1960s. I talk about the breakfast program and the political nature of food in the context of the Black Panther Party. It carries political implications when we think about food scarcity, something that many of us are still going through today because groceries are mad expensive. I mean, the whole crisis around eggs. Oh my God.
I got about $30 worth of eggs in my fridge.
And that's like just one carton.
Right. It's crazy. So many of the issues that was going on in 1960s, 1970s with the Panthers, some of the social issues, many of them are still with us today. Yeah. Very much still relevant. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been super, super fascinating. And as the best guests do, you dropped like 5 or 6 other little tantalizing facts where we're like, oh, we got to follow up on that. We got to follow up on that. We got to follow up on that. So this is great. But Mary Phillips, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Lehman. And the book you're working on is about Erica Huggins. We will have you on at least when that comes on, if not sooner. But thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I would absolutely love to come back. I so enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kelly Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Radiotopia.